right now. It's just, everything is so heavy. Everything is so heavy. Just been going through the motions, you know. I'm a healthcare provider, so I talk about grief a lot. Now to be on the other side of this is, it's a lot.
We do want to continue on with some of our top stories that we're following from this week. Taking you out to this, we have an update in a case that is really capturing attention all across the country. We do know that as of this weekend, the official autopsy in the death of Nolan Wells has been completed, according to officials who are familiar with that investigation.
He risked his own boat to save 5 strangers from drowning. His reward was a death threat, a lawyer, and his family's home address plastered across the internet by people who had never met him and never spoke to police. He did nothing wrong. But in the Nolan Wells case, being nearby was enough to make you a target. While the actual investigation crawled forward one sealed document at a time, an entirely different kind of damage was happening in real time, at internet speed, to people who had no part in what happened to Nolan at all. This is the story of what happens when the public decides it already knows the truth. Before we go further, if this case has had you hooked the way it's had us hooked, take a second to like this video, share it with someone who's been following along, drop a comment with your own theory, and subscribe to Real True Crime Analysis with the bell on. It really does help this channel keep digging into cases like this one. Now, let's get into what actually happened and everything that happened after. By now you know the basics. Nolan Wells went to Horn Island on July 4th with a group of friends. He didn't return to the mainland with them. 2 days later, his body was found in the water off the island's northwestern tip. What we're focusing on today is something we haven't fully covered yet: the boat that nearly sank that afternoon, the man who helped save it, and the online mob that turned him into a suspect he never was. Around 4 p.m. on July 4th, the boat carrying Nolan's friends ran into serious trouble. Audio obtained by NBC News captures the operator telling a sea tow dispatcher the bilge pump had failed and the boat was taking on water, requesting a tow. Help arrived, not from sea tow immediately, but from another boater nearby. That boater was Bart Edmiston Jr., 21 years old, a former Ocean Springs high school teammate of Nolan's, now a punter on the football team at the University of Wyoming. According to a statement released by his family, Edmiston was one of hundreds of people who'd made the trip to Horn Island that day. He piloted his own boat there and piloted it home. When he saw the distress vessel nearby, he brought his own boat alongside, boarded the struggling one, removed its transom plug so the accumulated water could drain, got back on his own boat, and towed the other vessel for a short distance until it stabilized. That's the entirety of Bart Edmiston's involvement in this story, based on everything that's been made public. He helped a boat that was sinking. He didn't know, at the time, that the incident would later become connected to a missing teenager, or that his own name would end up trending online days later, attached to accusations he had nothing to do with. Once investigators identified him as someone connected to the boat, Edmiston cooperated fully and immediately. His family statement says he sat for interviews and answered every question he was asked. He gave investigators access to his phone. He allowed his boat and GPS device to be inspected. He compiled a witness list of more than 20 people spread across 2 separate boats who could confirm what he'd done that day. He did all of this, according to his family, without an attorney, without a warrant, and without hesitation. Does that sound like the behavior of someone with something to hide? Full cooperation with law enforcement isn't usually how someone behaves when they're trying to conceal involvement in a death. And yet, despite all of that, Edmiston became one of the central names swirling around online accusations in the weeks that followed. Here's how that happened. As details of Nolan's case spread across social media, speculation filled the space where facts were missing. Amateur investigators, true crime commentators, and outright strangers began piecing together names, photos, and boat registrations, often getting basic facts wrong in the process. Edmiston's name surfaced repeatedly, accused by some online voices of being involved in Nolan's death, or of helping conceal what happened to him. None of it was true, and none of it was based on anything investigators had said publicly. But the accusations spread anyway, repeated and reshared until, According to his family, they reached millions of people. The consequences were real and immediate. Edmiston's family said he received a credible death threat. That's not a vague fear. That's a specific, documented threat serious enough that his family sought legal representation. Attorney Russell Latino, who also runs the nonprofit news outlet Magnolia Tribune, announced he was representing the Edmiston family and would pursue defamation claims against those spreading false information. He sent a cease and desist letter to a New Orleans-based social media influencer with more than 200,000 followers, alleging she had shared pictures of Edmiston's home, his residential address, and other personal information online. Latino didn't mince words in his public statement. He said plainly that Bart Edmiston Jr. did not kill or in any way contribute to the tragic death of Nolan Wells, that he had no motive to do so, and that all he did was help a boat that was in distress. His family added that these accusations were, in their words, fictions made up by people with no actual knowledge of the events of that day, fictions that were nonetheless seen by millions and repeated constantly. His family also said they've been working directly with the FBI, the Mississippi Attorney General, and the U.S. Attorney's Office to determine whether the people spreading these claims could face federal and state cyberstalking charges. Think about what that means for a moment. A young man does something most people would call heroic, stopping to help a sinking boat full of strangers, and it results in death threats against him and his family, threats serious enough to involve federal law enforcement. What does that tell you about how quickly a case like this can spiral once it leaves the hands of investigators and enters the hands of the public? Could the actual truth get buried under all that noise, simply because speculation moves faster than verified fact ever can? Edmiston wasn't the only person targeted. As this case grew into a national story, threats spread to others connected to it, people who, like him, had no real connection to what actually happened to Nolan. Joseph Alfredo Vasquez Dumars, from Sacramento, was charged in July with sending a threatening Facebook message to Jackson County Chancery Judge Ashley Cole, whose son was one of the friends on the trip with Nolan. Michelle Francine Edwards, from Ohio, was charged with calling the George County Chancery Clerk's office more than 20 times, warning that, in her words, the clock is ticking, and separately sending bomb threats to 2 different offices, including the Jackson County Sheriff's Department itself. Edward James Porter, from Illinois, was charged with threatening 2 members of Edmiston's own family, telling one relative he knew where they lived and describing, in graphic and disturbing detail, violence he intended to carry out. Here's what stands out about all 3 of these cases. Investigators have said none of the 3 people charged appear to have any actual connection to Nolan, his family, his friends, or the investigation itself. They weren't witnesses. They weren't on Horn Island on July 4th. They were strangers, scattered across 3 different states, radicalized entirely by what they'd consumed online, who decided to take real action against people they'd never met, based on accusations that were never confirmed by a single official source. All 3 now face serious charges, including federal charges for transmitting threats to kill or injure, which tells you how seriously prosecutors are treating this entire secondary wave of harm. So, where does that leave the actual investigation into Nolan's death? The one question that started all of this in the first place? It's still unresolved, and there are new details worth knowing. Details that show just how much work remains before anyone gets a real answer. Nolan's family commissioned an independent autopsy from Dr. Roger Mitchell Jr., a board-certified forensic pathologist and former chief medical examiner for Washington, D.C. His preliminary findings came back undetermined, and one specific gap stands out. Nolan's throat was not included among the remains available for that second examination. Mitchell is now working to obtain it, along with photographs taken closer to the time Nolan was actually recovered from the water, because that tissue could help answer one of the most important open questions in this entire case, whether water was present in his lungs at all, and separately, whether he was conscious when he entered the water. As Crump has pointed out, even a straightforward drowning finding wouldn't answer that second question on its own. A person can drown after being unconscious, after being injured, or fully alert. The manner matters just as much as the cause. Crump's legal team, led by attorney Eric Hertz, has also brought in outside experts most people wouldn't expect in a case like this. Forensic audio engineers are reviewing the complete sea tow emergency call in full, not just the brief clip that's circulated publicly, looking for anything in the background, tone, or timing that might add context to those critical minutes. And oceanic engineering experts have been brought in to examine something Crump has raised directly and repeatedly: how Nolan's body came to be recovered near the same northwestern tip of Horn Island where he was reportedly last seen. Given the tidal patterns in that area, low tides and high tides moving water in and out over roughly 2 days, Crump has said publicly that detail doesn't add up to him. That's a theory, not a conclusion, and it hasn't been confirmed or refuted by any official finding. But it's a legitimate scientific question, and if oceanic engineers can show currents in that area would have carried a body elsewhere, that could meaningfully shape how investigators and the public interpret what actually happened to Nolan. Meanwhile, the official state autopsy is finished, but sealed. It won't be released to the public independently. It goes directly to a Mississippi grand jury once the full investigation is complete, along with everything else gathered. Attorneys on Crump's team are also negotiating with the district attorney's office for a joint forensic inspection of the phones connected to this case, an inspection Hertz expects would likely include the FBI. So here's where this case actually stands. Nearly a month after Nolan Wells died, the central question, what happened to him in the hours before his friend's boat took on water, remains unanswered. A newly completed independent review of photos, video, GPS data, and witness accounts has concluded there's still a material gap in the timeline nobody has closed. The state's autopsy is complete, but withheld. The independent autopsy is missing key tissue needed to reach a firmer conclusion. And a legitimate scientific question about tides and body location remains open, being actively investigated by outside experts rather than settled fact. What we also know with total certainty is that this uncertainty created real victims beyond Nolan himself. A young man who did something genuinely helpful on a chaotic day now needs a lawyer to protect his family from death threats. Judges, witnesses, and their relatives have been targeted by strangers who had no actual stake in this case at all. 3 people now face criminal charges, including federal charges, for threats connected to a tragedy they had no role in causing. Does that change how you think about true crime discussions online, including the ones happening in comment sections just like this one? It's worth sitting with honestly. The pursuit of justice for Nolan Wells is real, and his family's demand for answers is completely legitimate and understandable given everything they've been through. But somewhere between legitimate questions and viral speculation, actual innocent people got hurt, and that's a part of this story that deserves just as much attention as the mystery itself. Here's what we know for certain. Nolan Wells died sometime after being separated from his friends on July 4th. His friend's boat suffered a real mechanical emergency that afternoon, and Bart Edmiston Jr. helped stabilize it before towing it to safety, an act of genuine assistance that later made him a target of false accusations online. 3 people with no connection to this case have been criminally charged for threats made against witnesses, officials, and Edmiston's family. The state autopsy is complete, but sealed. The independent autopsy remains incomplete, missing key tissue. And the question of how Nolan's body ended up where it was found, relative to the tides, is still being actively examined by outside experts. What we don't know may matter just as much. We don't know what happened to Nolan in the hours before that emergency call. We don't know the contents of the sealed state autopsy. We don't know whether the tidal question Crump's team is raising will hold up under expert scrutiny, or whether it will be explained by something entirely ordinary. And we don't know when or how the grand jury process will ultimately conclude, or what it will find once it does. What do you think happens when public pressure and online speculation move faster than an actual investigation? Does accountability for spreading false information matter as much as accountability for what happened to Nolan himself? Share your thoughts respectfully in the comments, because there are multiple families now living through the real consequences of how this case has unfolded online, and that's worth remembering every time a new detail breaks. If you found this analysis informative, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to Real True Crime Analysis, and turn on notifications so you never miss another investigation. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next case.